looking around. I hope I am clear. If I am, please let me know. There's one person waiting. You'll have to excuse me with this, my dark glasses. It's just the ring lights that drew me in with it. Am I audible? All right. Here we go. How's everyone doing? Let me see how I can share this across platforms. Hello, welcome. So let's do this. Yeah, right. Good to have you. Good to have you guys. Good to have you. Please, when you join, just indicate where you're joining from. It's good to have you. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not. We're going to be talking about a specific issue that has been bastardized and has been taken, used with against our people. Mostly for propaganda purposes. The narratives, always when you hear people talking about Boko Haram, there's always a slant, there's always a narrative against northern Nigeria or against Muslims or Islam or something like that. Well, today I'm here as somebody who has actually been born and bred here, been here all through, right from the start up till now, and I'm going to give you my honest opinion on what is actually happening. Well, you tell me after this engagement what you think is actually the issue. I said a poll. Please, if you can answer. I just want to get an opinion of what many people think. Yep. Okay. This particular I Am a Witness series is dedicated to showcasing the human angle of the Boko Haram insurgency, right from when it started and how it evolved and what it is now. It is especially important because I have noticed that there is a lot out there. Even when you go on the internet or when you're watching satellite TV or whatever it is you are doing, you see that they are playing say an attack happened somewhere in Borno and so happened, but then the way they say it, there is a slant in narrative, some sort of something to fit what they think is the problem. And there is a very big risk of people not telling their own stories, and that is where we found ourselves in Borno. Naturally, we have been behind in education for a long time. Since before the insurgency, like going to formal education, like Western education, Boko, was not like a thing that, the average rural dwellers, actually took serious. Now, coupled with 15 years of insurgency, a whole generation has been burned that has like that amount, and now the government is such in a very, very precarious position where they have to find a way to make sure yeah, I'm trying to share. Sorry, I'm trying to share. Okay, let me start this way. Do you know, in reality, the Borno Empire is more than 1,000 years old. 1,000 years old. That's a long time. Even for empires, even for kingdoms, that's a very, very long time. Now, and there is this superstition in Borno that every couple of every 100 years, there is always some form of calamity or catastrophe that happens to people in Borno, and that forces them to migrate outwards. Now, say in the last in the last 300 years alone, three separate catastrophes has happened. Okay, 300 years ago, there was an internal crisis with the Bulala, a Chadic tribe. They now live in mostly Chad region, which actually disrupted the empire. And then 200 years ago, Rabi, a Sudanese warlord who actually was a slave trader, conquered, slit the throat of the Shehu and took his throne, killed people, forced people to migrate. Yeah, that is why if you go to places like Nasarawa State today, you hear places that call Lafia. That Lafia Bari. Some people call it Lafia Bari. And if you notice, you see them, they have, okay, now people don't do facial marks any longer, but usually they have facial marks. Now, those people are actually Kanuris that migrated. And there are a lot of Kanuris too that have become Yoruba, Ibira, Igala, Idoma. So a lot of you might be claiming Yoruba or something else, but you don't know, maybe you are even genetically Kanuri. Now there's archaeological evidence to, not only archaeological, historical evidence to that. Right now, if you go to Nupe speaking communities and Ibera speaking communities, you see a lot of people carrying actual Kanuri names. Like I know a lot of Nupe families that answer Sheshi, Kolo, Ghana. These are pure Kanuri names. If you trace their ancestry back, they must have migrated, maybe not very far, maybe during the Rabi mass migration. Now, it is important to tell our stories because, you see, this is just a superstition. And I want to point that out, that because it is a superstition, the human mind is very vulnerable, to recognizing patterns. And then pattern recognition is a warning signal. It makes you understand that, yes, usually when things happen like this, something happens like this. So, Borno has been facing challenges. It has been also resilient. Borno is one hell of a resilient place, and that I can tell you, because we've been here 1,000 years before. We are here now. All the things that have happened, Arab slave traders, internal strife, civil war, assassinations, famine, drought, did not finish us. Boko Haram cannot finish us. Nobody will finish us until the day that God, closes this earth off. Maybe that day will be the last day of the Kanuri, and the people of Borno. But as of now, we are still here. And the evidence for that is the fact that people are resilient. Well, it was not always the case, but they learned. Yeah, they learned. They learned and adapted. Okay, I want you to look at it a little bit differently than if you notice my title, I said the Tremors. Now, what a tremor is usually a slight vibration of the earth that you are standing on. It vibrates and you feel it shake. That tremor is the movement of tectonic plates. And when tectonic plates move, the earths, actually move. So if you live in regions where there are a lot of tectonic plates, you are more likely to have tremors. And tremors cause, where there are more tremors, there's usually more likely to be a volcano. Now, the Boko Haram earthquake actually had its tremors rooted in a lot of things that were happening in that period, that range period. If you can remember, and if you are old enough, the world radically shifted and changed when, after the September 11th, 2001 bombings of the United States World Trade Center. There was a lot of Islamophobia. The United States invaded Afghanistan, it invaded Iraq, it invaded where again, and it coincided with an era where there is an advancement and cheap access to information technology. That was the time that people were actually having access to a lot of cellular phones, and they could watch what was happening. Initially, all that happened, you just hear them, and there is no visceral experience of what is happening. But the internet and the mobile phone quite changed everything. Now, and at the same time, if you can remember, Nigeria was just getting back into democracy because Obasanjo came back in 2009. And Boko Haram started. Obasanjo came back in 1999. Boko Haram started in 2001. Actually, their first attack was in 2001. But Boko Haram started in earlier 2001. But the first violent act that killed much people was in 2009, but it was in 2001 in Kanama. They stopped people there and killed them. Well, let me just trace the root causes. Okay, we have identified several. Nigeria experimenting with the free speech that comes with a new democracy, giving people platforms to call themselves imams and then read passages so that people will listen and then tell them, okay, do this, do that, do this, do this, do this, do that. That is one. Two, the Islamophobia. A lot of Muslims were looking at the way that the United States was, attacking a lot of African countries and killing a lot of Africans. That also made a mark, one thing with, these wars that generate a lot of collateral damage is that they bring moral scars to the people who identify with those who are injured and caused harm in that war, to the point that they wish if they had any means to help them, they would. Now, that is essentially what happened. That war was happening at that time. If you could remember, Obasanjo battled with the idea of Sharia as at that time. Because it was a nascent democracy, and the idea about democracy is that everybody had the right to do and live the way they like. So some governors wanted Sharia, they applied for it. Some didn't want it and resisted. But then it was at a time where there was a fervor for democracy, and people were just like, oh, let us express our rights. It's our right to live and worship the kind of God we want, the way we want. And Obasanjo, the president, yielded and gave Zamfara the right to do Sharia. Now, a lot was happening as at that time. If you remember those MP3 phones, that was the time we were graduating from VHS to CDs, from cassettes to MP3 devices that uses USB ports, So rural dwellers who usually do not have access to information and who have been, abandoned by their government for long, they've not seen any benefits of belonging to the state called Nigeria. And they live in arid regions. Like Borno is an arid region. We're just at the border with the Sahara Desert. We're not that far from the Sahara Desert. We're not the Sahara, but some parts of Borno are so arid that you can call it just a pure desert. If you go to places like Damasak or Yusufari, oh my God, you think you are in the Sahara Desert already. Now, these desolate places where usually they don't know what is happening, now suddenly have access to information. They could not only listen, they could see. And now information explosion. But then you have to remember, I want you to understand something. Just because you can read does not mean you understand what you read. I don't know whether that makes sense. You can understand the concept of reading, adding this flooded. Okay, for example, I show you a new word. You could read it, you could read it right, pronounce it right, but you still don't know the meaning. That was what was happening as at that time. So the world was changing. There was a lot of Islamophobia. A lot of Muslims were disgruntled by the Islamophobia that was going on and the killings of Muslims in Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on, televised. If you could remember, Saddam Hussein was actually executed on the day of Salah. It was Muslims felt it was intentional. A lot of Muslims felt it was intentional, and Borno being this Muslim conservative base, a lot of people really felt it. Now, these were the little tremors that were happening, and suddenly, a lot of imams now have access, that have had fundamental rights to preach. Nobody can stop you. The Constitution has given you the right to say, to preach, and live and the kind of religion that you want. All these things were adding up. Add to that the fact that as at that time, the state government and the people who actually control the apparatus of state were so much politically, how would I say, the focus of governance was so elitist that it did not consider anyone else. It only considered the people who, had power. Now, the post 9/11 world, people having access to mobile devices, and now this feeling of globalization and dominance over the Western powers, over the Islamic world, and also the fact that the Nigerian government did not take care of the people of Borno. In reality, rural Borno and the Borno state government too, so they were left behind, so left behind that their situation was very, very, very bad. And now, because we are experimenting with democracy, a lot of things happened. Sociologically, it is interesting to just look at human beings and see the way they manage change. There is such a thing as the science of management of change. So in whatever you are doing, say as a government or as a leader, whatever it is you are doing in life, and you want to bring change, and that change is going to affect the behaviors of human beings, it is advised that you have a plan to implement that change. Remember the way the government changed the currency just one time like that, and the kind of trouble it caused? That is what you don't want. Change has to be managed, but in our own case, change was not managed, and we were living on the edge, and then the stars aligned, and like a keg of gunpowder, everything exploded. So the perfect storm that caused Boko Haram not to be said to be, this is something that I think is, you can go ahead and research yourself and find out, so that you will understand the context in which people lived at that time. One, was 9/11 world, and the backlash Islam was getting, and the hate, the invasion and a lot of collateral damage, the killings of a lot of Muslims in Afghanistan, Iraq, that was televised, and a lot of people had access to see. And at that time, it was a time of breakthrough of technology where people were beginning to have handsets and what do they call it? MP3s, CDs, and things like that. All that. And don't forget, a lot of these people who have these devices now, it's not that they are like literate in Western education. A lot of them have Arabic Islamic education, but usually the rate of Western education in Borno, has always been like at best 40-60, at best 40-60, even at the good times. Now, then this happened. What actually happened was a divide began to happen between different factions of Islam. There are people who, and this did not originate in Maiduguri per se. It was already a phenomenon that was happening since in the 70s, but it accelerated as at that time, because the 90s and the 90s and early 2000s were the most hottest times in terms of the switch of the majority of the Nigerian northern population from the traditional Tariqa kind of Islam to the Sunni kind of Islam. Now the Sunni kind of Islam, which is the one that is done in Saudi Arabia, relies more on evidence that whatever it is that you say is religion, you have to prove it that first it came from the Quran, أن مسائل الدين العلمية والعملية مبنية على كتاب الله تعالى وما فهم من أحاديث رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم على وفق فهم السلف الصالح رضوان الله عليه. Okay, the theology, it has to be that first it has to come from the Quran, the Hadith, but the Hadith has to be authenticated first, okay, and then the interpretation of that has to be based on the understanding of the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who knows the Prophet very well and can interpret what those words meant. Now, this theology is new because this theology is the oldest theology because that was what the Prophet came with. But however, over time, the Sufis, the Tariqas, some originated from Morocco, from Senegal. So Nigeria has usually, just followed that type of one. Now, because of information and a lot of people having access to go to the Islamic universities in Medina and came back and began to, preach, a lot of people were now beginning to follow Sunni Muslim Islam. So this divide between Sunni and Tariqa Islam, was making headway as at that time. And the argument was, who can prove that yes, what I'm doing, as far as what God says, is the right thing? And that was just it. Well, at the end of the day, the burden of proof is on the person that alleges. You have to provide proof. So Maiduguri itself was changing because if you go back to the 80s and you go through the streets of Maiduguri, even in the 90s, you see a lot of usually traditional Kanuri women. They have a way they braid their hair, kaya school, they call it, and it's so beautiful, different intricate designs. So they don't usually cover their hair. But there was this Malam, Allah shi, me sunan malamin nan ne da yake wurin Gwange, Malam Abba Aji. Yes, his name is Malam Abba Aji. Malam Abba Aji was actually the first Sunni scholar, that actually made inroad in Maiduguri, and had a lot of people, abandon the Tariqa and switch to the Sunni, and that was the beginning of it. So the whole of the country was going through this transition. The same thing with Maiduguri. Just add all these things up. Now, poverty, ignorance, but understand something. Even though people of Borno are poor, people of Borno are the most kindest, generous, understanding, and community-oriented people you can ever meet. Because when you come to Borno, if you don't have one kobo, you can eat from morning till night. And you can eat with the most richest man. There is so much in the culture of humility that when it's time to eat food, you just go anywhere and everybody brings out his food, on his veranda and eats with the children and people. And if you are passing by, say you stop by to pray or something, you just join and eat food. Up till now in Maiduguri, food is taken as something that you just have to. It's nothing. So there is this deep sense of community, of brotherhood, and everybody wants to help everybody. That was the Maiduguri. And they sell perfumes, Arabian perfumes, usually in Maiduguri. The Arabian perfumes that you usually see in Kano and most northwestern states, they actually come through here. Like, there is documented history of importation of a particular species of tree that they call sandal. This sandal tree actually grows in India 500 years ago. 500 years ago, can you imagine? 500 years ago. And in one of the documents of the correspondences of a former shehu, that he made that went through Egypt. So this culture of generosity, communism, is all there in Borno. Ahmad Musa. Hello, Ahmed Yani. Hello, Ahmed. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yo, we are talking about Borno State and insurgency and Boko Haram. You know, the things that actually caused it. And now, another thing too that caused Boko Haram is the killing of Gaddafi. Suddenly, Americans killed Gaddafi. Gaddafi did not just die. When Gaddafi died, you know, actually what happened was, they call it the Arab Spring. A lot of North African government actually collapsed as at that time. And there was this, you know, huge Arab rise against their rulers. But that specific case of Gaddafi was the one that hurt me most, and I think actually contributed more to the Boko Haram, you know, insurgency than anything, because that gave Boko Haram to real weapons, access to real weapons that made them do the damage that they did. So, Borno people, those who traded were rich people. Those who farmed were rich people. Those who studied were deeply knowledgeable. Like, we have a lot of people who have memorized the Quran. We have a lot of people who, you know, are actually, do you know that Borno actually supplies and has the largest fresh fish market in West Africa? Do you know that? Borno has the largest fresh fish market in West Africa. This baga that you keep hearing about, yes, there was a time the chairman of UBA came to Maiduguri unexpectedly, and the governor went to see him, and the governor was like, "What brings you to Maiduguri?" I think it was Senator Alimadi Sharif that was governor at that time. I think it was around 2003-4. What brings you to Maiduguri? And the chairman was, "Your Excellency, if I tell you, you may not believe it, but since I became chairman of this bank, I've known of a branch in your state that came only second to our Lagos branch in the number of deposits." Imagine the number of deposits for UBA, the second branch that deposits the highest amount of money in all of Nigeria is the UBA Baga branch. That tells you something. That tells you something. So a lot of businesses were going on, stuff were happening, people were living their lives, and then there was a ratcheting up of rhetorics along the Sunni divide. Then someone called Muhammad Yusuf, who is a student of Sheikh Jafar Mahmoud Adam of blessed memory, got an accidental chance to step on a podium while Jafar was not around.
But listen, big up to everyone.
But that changed everything. But for that minuscule minutes that Muhammad Yusuf got on, he was just like a mini Hitler, actually, Muhammad Yusuf. A lot of people do not know that. There was a time I read something about Hitler and his propaganda, that the way he talked to people, that he was so riveting, that if he talked to you, he was so convincing that it's hardly, most of the time he convinces than, people are able to disregard what he says. He is that good of a debater, speaker, he's somebody like that. So Muhammad Yusuf is somebody who can convince very, very well. I remember I used to listen to his Kitab Tawhid. The way he explains things is quite good. Now, don't forget, that was the rise of the internet. Those times were the rise of the internet, and a lot of people were having access to a lot of information. But the way it is in Islam is that with the moment you start to deal with religious books, you cannot do your own interpretations. Now, where people go wrong and where extremist groups go wrong, that is the Kharijites. The Kharijites are the people usually non-Muslims call terrorists. Internally, we Muslims call them Kharijites because they are Khawarij. Khawarij means an extremist, even in Islamic terms, because the Prophet talked about them, and he said that when you see them, you will think that you go to hellfire. I'm paraphrasing now. You'll think that you go to hellfire just by the way that they are dedicated to worshiping God, the way they carry themselves, But they live the faith and religion just the way the arrow, leaves, the bow. That is how fast they leave the religion. So, a lot was happening, and in a short space of time. Let me tell you a story about somebody, and I just want you to follow me a little bit about this guy. So there's this guy we call OC Sugar. Now OC Sugar is a nigger. There was a time in Nigeria where when you are somebody, you want to claim African American culture and be thuggish, you wear baggy jeans, you wear hats, you do things like so this guy OC Sugar is a quite popular guy, dresses like Tupac, wear bandanas, do this, do that, always rapping, so he's like the streets nigga. Everybody knows him. He's quite social with people. Now, when Boko Haram started, it actually started innocently. We were looking at them and looking at at these people and saying, how can people be this moronic? How can somebody be preaching to you that other Muslims are not Muslims if they do not subscribe to your own version of Islam? And remember also, yes, how this intersects with our new democracy. A lot of times I have had Sheikao and his predecessor Muhammad Yusuf talked about the maze, and that the maze in the National Assembly, they carry it, they keep it, and then if you come, you have to bow down. That it had pagan origins, and that is worship to paganism, and that means that Nigeria is a that if you follow Nigeria, you follow a pagan god, and then you are a pagan, and then you are going to burn in hell. All these things. So there was a lot of these kind of things and all these kind of moronic arguments. So sometimes we'll engage OG Sugar in these arguments, and OG Sugar actually changed his life from being this nigger that everybody knows, in the streets, to now becoming a devoted Muslim who prays 5 times a day. You see him always clean, always neat, never takes any drugs, never does anything sinful. He is just doing the right things all the time. And we'll sit down with him sometimes, and Oshishuga wants to convince us to abandon Western education. And the talk about is Bagut, at Bagut. So the Bagut thing is a reference to idol worship, that if you somehow, even as much as pledge allegiance, say the national pledge or the national anthem, that you are kafir, you are no longer Muslim. Talk less of you becoming a soldier or something like that. That makes it worse. So it kept going up until the time that when politics comes, several things happen and different interest groups collide. Oshishuga became somebody who became somebody you could not mock anymore. So even though he was making these awkward religious, illogical, irrational statements about how we should stop going to Western education, we should stop going to school, we should stop making our children our younger ones go to school. He was making all these arguments to us. Yeah, we could listen to him because we've seen a drastic shift, a change in his life for the better. But then his arguments were just not rational. So we'll listen, and then after he leaves, we'll laugh. We'll listen, and then after he leaves, we'll laugh. Sometimes we mock the argument and say how ridiculous this kind of argument. How can somebody convince you that just because you are in a country that is set up under a system, a model that is designed in the West, that have things that are not in your control, that then you have to fight to kill the person, to take over, or you yourself become, what kind of twisted mind? It doesn't really make sense. If you hear them argue their case, if you have any semblance of the understanding of logic, you will not take it. But the problem is where there is a lot of lack of education, then there is, there's an opportunity for, any kind of idea to go through. But they were legitimate reasons. People had legitimate reasons to hate the government. And those legitimate reasons were channeled in the wrong way. And Mohammed Yusuf was so hungry for power that he would admit in private with more knowledgeable Islamic scholars that what he was preaching was wrong. And then he will tell them that he will go back and tell his Boko Haramist students that what he was doing was wrong. But then he never goes and does that. So let me keep telling you about Oshishuga. Oshishuga started a business and was investing money in some form of shipping, importing. He was importing something, exporting something. Is it hides and skin or something like that? And Oshishuga was like progressing. And you can see the shift in Oshishuga's life since he joined these guys. He was now very, very dedicated, making money, doing his things, and he's always preaching. He's always trying to bring you to his own side. Now, Oshishuga, after he leaves, we mock him, we smile, we drive, we clap. But then, those mockery of Oshishuga later became frowns. And those frowns later became despair. And those despair became frustrations. And those frustrations later became tears. And those tears at some point. We drew the line in the sand, and from there on, the tides shifted. I'm going to stop here. I'll continue with OC Sugar. Please subscribe if you haven't. And we need to start telling the story of actually what happened at the grassroots and how Boko Haram actually got to penetrate. I will continue with OC Sugar's story on the next series. Until then, thank you for coming. I appreciate you all. I have seen Ahmed Musa, Zakaya, and I know some people are watching on Facebook. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you. Everyone, thank you. Hope to see you on the next series. Subscribe, please. Bye.